Hello, this is Angela from Polkadotsheep.com, and today I'd like to talk to you about the crown jewel hat and how to do the interlock section of the hat, which is this series of triangles and rectangles and other triangles that go around the bottom of the hat. So I was going to talk to you about how to do this triangle section in the hat pattern. So here I have my yarn ready to demonstrate for you, and I've already done a few triangles on this hat. They sit kind of strange on your needles because you're actually working each one back and forth. You actually turn your work, and so you end up with this series of oddly disjointed looking knitting going around your needle. So it looks a little strange when you're working on it. So you start out with one of these triangles, and I am making the junior size. So there is the first part of the triangle instructions are exactly the same for all sizes, and then towards the end they do change per size because there's less triangles around, obviously a baby size versus a toddler or junior sizes in making. So your first thing that you do is you slip this first stitch, and I slip it purlwise so it sits correctly on the needle with the front leg towards the front and the back leg leaning towards the back. Then you knit one. Then when the pattern says turn, that's literally what you do, is you turn your work and you purl across. And this is where you start grabbing another stitch from down around your already live stitches on the needle. And you grab that stitch and then you turn it again. And this first one on the knit sides, you always are going to be slipping. So you go across, then you turn again, and you can see how that gap is developing between this triangle and the triangle prior to it, that they're not actually attached to each other. That then you'll be going back, and when you work your rectangles, then they become attached to each other. It's modular knitting where you are picking up different things at different times, and it changes how your knitting looks because you're changing directions also. So across here, so you can see that gap. Now a purl section. Then you turn again. Is growing there. And now coming up the part where we've actually stepped from, this is specific to this size, the junior size, where I purl across 6. If I was doing the baby size, the instructions will have changed at this point. So, but here we're working on the junior size, like I said before. So your triangles are of slightly different sizes and numbers around the hat based on the size you're making. So this is the last part of this one. So at the last instruction is to purl 9. So I'm going to purl across my triangle, which at this point has 6 stitches in it, across the long edge. And then I'm going to go over here where it is on the needle and purl 3 more stitches. And that'll set me up to do my next triangle. And there you have it. When I finished my triangles, I decided for my rectangles I wanted a slightly different color. So what I did is I had this green going on here, and I had my yarn, and I decided I looked kind of through my thing and I pulled out until I got to some kind of turquoisey blue. And the way I did that is I just basically pulled the yarn off my skein with all this yarn in between the green and the kind of more turquoise color I wanted. I just pulled that right off of there and came to the color I wanted more and just started knitting again with that color. Okay, I'm going to show you how to construct the rectangles in between the triangles in your knitting. So here you can see my triangles. There's a green one here and a green one here, and I've made this rectangle already. So your instructions say to pick up and knit, and it'll tell you this number of picking up and knit depends upon the size of the hat you're making. Again, which makes sense. So for me that's 6. So I'm going to pick up and knit 6. I've got 3, 4, 5, 6. So there you go. I have 6 picked up and knit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I'm going to turn my work, and that very first stitch you purl, you slip purlwise, and then you purl back up to the top of where you started picking up again. So that forms your first row for your hat. So let's make sure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sometimes it's a little tricky. You almost want to grab that next one on there, and it's not actually it. Then you knit back down again until you get down to the bottom. So for me that's knit 5 out of 6, and that 6th stitch that's down here, and you have some live stitches from that next triangle over here on this side. You slip that stitch, then you have these things, and you knit a live stitch off that next triangle past this stitch over top of that where you've decreased. You've gone from 2 stitches to 1, and you've grabbed 1 out of that triangle. So then you turn and you proceed to do the same thing where you knit back up to the top and back down again to almost the bottom, to that last stitch, slip 1 and then knit 1 and pass that slip stitch over. And you do that until you've used up all of those stitches on that last, that next triangle. So I've nearly finished this rectangle, and you can see I have just 1 stitch left of this triangle right here. So I'm just going to knit back down to show you what it looks like when you finish those all off. All the way down here, slip, knit, pass the slip stitch over, and there you have it, a completed rectangle. And then you proceed down the side of this one and up the side of this one to put another rectangle in between these 2 triangles. And you just go on and so forth all around. When you get to the next section, for the top triangles, you're actually filling up the space in here. So, but once you've done these triangles and these rectangles, the top triangle directions will make sense to you. Just as a side note, just read through them carefully, because you actually start with this top one. You start with the wrong side facing and you pick up stitches. So just read through the directions to make sure that you remember how to go about doing that. And otherwise you'll be amazed by your skills, and other people will definitely be amazed, because it is really interesting, because in this case your knitting is going in this direction, and then in these rectangles your knitting is going in this direction. So it makes for a really cool effect. Plus, when you pair it with a color-changing yarn, such as Noro Silk Garden, which this pattern calls for, and I have been using throughout, and it's available from polkadotsheep.com. You know, it looks phenomenal, and people are just amazed, especially non-knitters and even knitters, because not everyone has tried the Entrelac technique.